So in the next 15 minutes, you will hear the official opening of the EfVET Conference 2021. Would you please welcome EfVET President, Professor, Principal, and CEO Malta College of Arts, Mr. Joachim James Kaleha.
Thank you very much, Jean. Thank you for your introduction and for joining us for this annual EfVET conference. It's a pity that we cannot be physically together in Finland, of course. We have been promising our dear colleagues in Finland that we should be visiting their country for the last 2 years. But as you know, we are compelled to stay home, to stay where we are now because of COVID. But hopefully, and we keep hoping that for the next EfVET conference, we will visit your lovely country. Today, it is one of those blustery days in my country. It's not sunny at all. We have been having a very bad weather for the last few days, and we hope that by Sunday we will get the sun out again in Malta. Well, it's an honor for me to be heading this organization. And I really welcome all the members, all my colleagues on the executive board and the steering committee, all our visitors from Europe and from beyond Europe, our dear friends from Hong Kong, Zimbabwe, and other countries who are joining EfVET because they see a significant organization growing in its role for vocational education and training. And it's no coincidence that the conference committee for this year chose a very important title, Shaping the Future, Sustainable and Innovative VET, for a title for this conference. And the reason for this is because everyone has had an experience which has not been all that pleasant with the pandemic. And therefore, we are hoping that the future will be better. But for the future to be better, we need to be the protagonists of the present, because this will determine what sort of future, as educators, as teachers, as training providers, we will have, and what sort of vocational education and training we will provide to our learners. Fortunately, in my country, we have opened the doors for our students to come back to college. And I must tell you, it has been a marvelous scene here at college on a much brighter days last week and the week before that, when thousands of students came back to our library, to our canteen, to our corridors and workshops and laboratories. It was a new beginning for us, because we missed our students, and the students missed the lecturers and the interaction that occurs between them. But to focus on the agenda of today, we are talking about shaping the future. And when we talk about shaping the future, I think there are 3 documents which have been provided by the European Commission and by member states, of course, which do indicate the way we should be designing, shaping the future of vocational education and training. I am referring to the Osnabrück Declaration, I am referring to the Council recommendation on VET, and of course I'm referring to the European Skills Agenda. When you look deeper into these documents, and this will be of course reflected in the discussions that we will be having today during this conference, you will realize that the transition to digital and green economies will be top on the agenda of our vocational colleges, of our applied universities, of the agenda of vocational training for the future. Digitalization and climate change, of course, will have definitely a major impact on our economies, on the employment, and on society at large. We have experienced what digitalization is all about. It has kept us going. It has kept the colleges and the schools and the universities going for the last 18 to 19 months. Without technology, we would not have survived. And therefore, the future about vocational training should also be taken in the context of the impact of digitalization. To what extent will this enrich our teaching? To what extent will this enlarge and widen the possibility of access to vocational education and training? But we do have some challenges that we have to look into as educators, as training providers. The challenge of demographic change is a reality. People are aging, we have less young people coming up the ladder. We need to start rethinking work. We need to start rethinking retirement. We need to start rethinking why lifelong learning, which goes back to the 1970s, has been such a visionary and important aspect of the sustainability of humankind on this planet. Lifelong learning. We cannot do without it because of demographic change, but also because of digital innovation, because of sustainable or climate neutral approaches that we have to look into and embed in our learning, because of the growing demand for STEM skills. And why are STEM skills gaining more importance is because technology is capturing the whole society in which we live in. Of course, there is now also the increasing need to constantly upskill and reskill through a person's working life. And in one phrase, you could say, we can never stop learning. Once you stop learning, you will stop working. You will almost stop living. Then there is besides the challenges, how can we sustain VET? And this is something which will be discovered and discussed later today. Sustainability is a transversal, I would say transversal concern that interacts with labor demands, with education, with skills, with occupations, and how jobs and workers are being distributed in society. And therefore, we need, as educators and training providers, to promote initiatives, to support cooperation, to support knowledge sharing. Let's not forget, knowledge is available everywhere, anytime. I normally ascribe to YouTube the best teacher in the world today, and a teacher whom you can find at your fingertips any time of the day. But then there is also sustainability because of the greening building management systems, and therefore the greening culture that our students need to inculcate while they are in our colleges and in our applied universities and higher education institutions. And therefore, as educators, we have experienced it, I have experienced it myself. There is a paradigm change. There's a change in the mentality of how we manage colleges, of how we administer colleges. What we do for our students today is not the same of what we were doing before the pandemic. Technology has become the driving force. Every student needs to have his own devices, his own machines in order to communicate. Of course, we need digitalization, therefore, for sustainability. And therefore, when we talk about all of this, work-based learning takes the full credit for being at the forefront of what education and training, vocational education training is all about. It's all about work-based learning in the various forms, among which, of course, apprenticeship or placements or simulated learning environments takes prominence. Therefore, effective apprenticeships are linked to green technologies and occupations in a more rapid way, and we need to think about it in a more sustainable and structured manner. To conclude, we are thinking about innovative VETs. There is great potential today in colleges and in schools of vocational training and higher education for innovation, digitalization to support high quality and higher vocational training. We need to find creative solutions, and therefore creativity, thinking about outside the box for students should be part of their learning at our colleges. EfVET prepares, of course, learners for occupations where creativity is necessary. It drives new ideas in businesses and in industry, and it helps also to close the skills gaps that often we are being accused as educators we are not providing the skills that industry requires. And therefore we need a sustainable research culture, research that has an impact on our lives, on the institutions where we teach. And therefore cooperation, partnerships is the order of the day. We need to be more in contact with each other. And this is where EfVET is important, because EfVET is a strong network. EfVET can share knowledge. EfVET can take you on board on different projects, on different ways of collaboration. And therefore, we miss mobility. We miss the physical contact of what internationalization is all about. But above all, when we talk about innovation, we need to pump in more resources, more funding, but also more leadership. And I consider you, members of EfVET, as leaders in your capacity, leaders in your own countries, in your own organizations. And this is my message for this conference. Let's train ourselves to be better leaders, because we need new approaches to reach that excellence that we talk about. We need modern digital learning technologies, and therefore we need to be leaders in the sector. And we need to adapt curricula to the new labor market needs with higher skills that are needed and higher regional and local leadership. We need multi-stakeholder cooperation and, of course, funding for investment policies. So to conclude, I am very excited to listen to all the speakers today. Shaping the future, therefore, is the mantra for the next few hours in this sharing of knowledge online. And I really wish to thank my colleagues who have made this task possible even for 2021. The conference team at EfVET has been fantastic. They have worked as a real good team, a team that has delivered this great opportunity for us to exchange knowledge, to lay the ground, the roadmap that we need to take between now and the visits that we are hoping to do in the next year to Finland, and to gather again this brilliant EfVET family together for another conference in 2022. I augur a good listening and good exchanges. I know we have some formidable speakers and friends and colleagues who are engaging themselves during this day. And I really thank all of you, the hundreds, so far the 116 participants, maybe more, who have joined us for this conference. I wish you all good deliberations, and I'll meet you again at the very end of this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before introducing our next speaker, I would like to remind you that if you have any questions from the following speakers, please type them into the Zoom chat box. At the end of their presentations and speeches, we will have time for questions. To keep the quality of sound functional during the presentations, please try to remember mute yourself. Now it is time to focus on VET policies in the EU, mapping the future of learning in vocational education and training. Over the next 11 minutes or 12 minutes, we will be listening a head of unit for vocational education and training, a true professional from the European Commission. Please welcome Ms. Chiara Riondino.
Thank you very much, Janne. Very happy to be here. I will share my screen, and in the meantime, I would like to give a very warm welcome to all participants, and especially A special thought to our colleagues in Finland, and everyone would have wished, of course, to be there with you. But unfortunately, we are here. And James, we stole your sun because it's a beautiful day in Brussels. I see that I have something in the middle of my screen. I don't know if you see the same or if you see okay.
No, we can't see your presentation.
You don't see my presentation?
No, at least I cannot see it.
Okay, it worked earlier, so I will try again and try to go back. So it's typical because we tried.
Now we can see it. Now I can't.
Now I have to get. Let's try again.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good.
It's good to go.
So thanks a lot for inviting me here. Very happy to be in this meeting, which is the 30th of your conference. So congratulations for this very nice and round number. It's an important achievement. As James already mentioned, we have some key documents that we are now working on at EU level. And the first one is, of course, the Council recommendation that was adopted at the end of last year. And you know very well, so I will not spend too much time on it, but just to recap three main elements of the recommendation. So
sorry to interrupt you, but I cannot see your presentation again.
Chiara, I will do for you.
There is something which is not
Thank
working
you.
from your end. Maybe Valentina can intervene.
Yes, that would be great. Then I will stop sharing. And we are on the second slide for the VET recommendation. So the one before. Thank you. So the first is to equip young people and adults with the skills they need. The second one is to foster inclusiveness and equal opportunities. And of course, also we want VET, EU VET, to be seen as a worldwide reference for excellence. So next slide. There are some key principles that we are all collectively working towards. And the first one is that VET needs to be agile and adaptive to the dynamic changes in the labor market. We would like VET to be flexible and offer opportunities for progression. We want VET to be a driver for innovation and growth. We need VET to be attractive. So young people and adults need to know that if they choose VET, they are starting a path that opens up opportunities that will help them realize their potential. And for this, we need excellent teachers. We need the possibility to progress and not start in one pathway and be stuck into that path. We need to cater for equal opportunities. We really need each and every one of us in this society and in the labor market, and we need to find a way to reach out to those who are a bit further from education and training and from the labor market. We are working together to underpin that with quality assurance, and we would like to really make sure that there is effective governance. So like James was saying, partnerships. And we are waiting very excitedly for member states to present their national implementation plans by May 2022. And I would like to remind you that there is a very important provision in the VET recommendation, which is that when they prepare and define these national implementation plans, member states told themselves in the Council recommendation that they want and they need to involve national stakeholders, the VET providers, the social partners, the civil society. Next slide, please. Of course, the Osnabrück Declaration is another pillar of our policy and our priorities. And of course, it's very important because it is broader, let's say, than the council document, because we have your support, EfVET support, and that of other European vet providers organization. We have the commitment of social partners. We have candidate countries, European Economic Area countries. So it's really a shared commitment on concretely delivering on specific objectives. And again, I will not go into it, but this is a nice illustration of what the Osnabrück Declaration is all about. Innovation, this was also a very important element. So that is really, it has been increasingly in the last few years a motor for innovation, a laboratory where things are tested out. And for us, our best example, or maybe bigger and more visible example of this drive are the Centers of Vocational Excellence. This is something that started as a pilot project, and it took off immediately. And so much so that, and we are very happy that it happened, that the European Parliament decided to double the budget that we had proposed in our wildest dreams, because initially the Commission had proposed 200 million to promote COVs all across Europe, and the Parliament said you can have 400. So we will be able, with this budget, to fund 100 COV networks from now to 2027. And you know, of course, the COVs very well. You are part of the first wave of COVs, namely in automotive and water. And we are seeing that the quality of the projects that were presented during the pilot phase was excellent. So we really have high hopes for this next waves. The call, the first official and stable call of this period was launched in September. Was launched before the summer, and we are already now working on the evaluation of these calls with a view to publish the selected projects by February next year. And we are already coming with a new call, because you know we had a delay this year. It was the beginning of the new financial period, and we started late. So now we are catching up, and we are already expecting to publish the next call already in November. So in a few days, in a few weeks. The project lasts for 4 years, and the most important thing is that they are fully embedded in the ecosystem. So again, this idea of partnerships, this idea of bringing together education and training provider, companies, big and small, really incorporating this in the economic and social fabric of the territory. And also the beauty of these centers is that they really span different, very different content. So they go from social inclusion to greening of the economy, and responding to the new pedagogies that have really started to take up during the pandemic. We have some amazing already results in terms of using virtual reality or augmented reality or mixed reality for real work-based, simulated, but still real work-based learning experiences. And this, of course, is also opening up new opportunities that we were not even thinking of. So the possibility to really exercise and practice something even in a dangerous environment where we would not dream of bringing not fully trained people, but thanks to technology, we can do that. Next slide, please. As a bit of a novelty, maybe we didn't speak so much about this yet because we have a commission proposal for a council recommendation that is coming up in December. And it's the proposal for a council recommendation on micro-credentials. So what are micro-credentials? These are certificates that certify small units of learning, small processes of learning. And this is very already, I would say that it's a very new but exciting trend, and we have seen that especially during the lockdown, where people could not access training in person, or maybe they even needed to reskill quickly because of changes in their job. Microcredentials really took up as a concrete tool for people to upskill and reskill at their own pace. So the objective of the recommendation is not so much to stimulate the use of microcredentials, because we see that there is a lot already going on, but more to bring some clarity and understanding. So what are microcredentials? Of course, in the university world, this is something that is more advanced and more homogeneous in a way. But we have a lot of different types of microcredentials which are offered by VET providers, which are offered by companies themselves, which are, for example, designed by social partners in the context of the need for upskilling and reskilling in a specific sector. And we want individuals to be aware of this opportunity so that they can use this tool to define their own learning pathways when and where it suits them. So next slide, and I think we can also skip this slide because I already mentioned some of these. So next slide. And now we get to talk about higher VET. We have been working for a long time now on this less, let's say, clear part of the education, of the vocational education pathway. Why do I say less clear? Because there are some issues in trying to understand the boundary and where tertiary education is of a vocational nature and where it's considered university. So we are now working, partnering with the OECD in a study to bring better clarity and better understanding on what we mean by higher VET. And we look at two interesting trends, I would say, on both sides of the border, because as James was saying, we have been in the VET world, we have been accused of focusing too much on the occupational side of education and training. And this has had a very positive actually result, because we all know that VET graduates find a job much faster than graduates that come from general education. But it is true, and we need to have this critical self-reflection that, as it has come up even more during the pandemic and with the fast transitions in the labor market, that graduates have more difficulty in these transitions. And why is that? It's because the transversal skills are less developed. So James was mentioning creativity. Yes, we need to make sure that we add more creativity, more problem solving, more entrepreneurship, more analytical kind of skills in all curricula, so that we give all the VET learners the possibility to move more flexibly between one sector and the other. But on the other hand, we have seen also another trend. We have seen that universities and also general education to some extent are starting to look at what VET does in the context of work-based learning. Why? Because it's important and it's clear, and it's thanks to the VET providers that the value of practical experience of work-based learning has become clear to everyone, and the positive effect not only in the labor market but also in the confidence of people in taking up new experiences in life has really become very, very clear. So I'm very happy that you are focusing also on this topic in this conference, because for us this is really a high priority, and we hope that more and more quality higher VET opportunities will also mean more attractive opportunities for all, and also a philosophy of lifelong learning. Next slide. Sorry, next slide. I tend to talk too much on the words, so we can go to the next slide. Some updates on our side, and I'm going to the end of the presentation. We are working on the next European Vocational Skills Week. The next edition will be in spring 2022, and I can already tell you that likely, though this has still to be confirmed, but likely it's going to be in the week of the 16th of May. And we will have a 1 day or a 2 half days conference at EU level. But what we want to do with this edition is really showcase and promote the events organized by stakeholders at local, regional, and national level. Because in our journey now, after 5 editions, we're going for the 6th editions, we see that we really managed to drum up awareness and support in the EU community, and how we really want to continue this at more local level, to be in touch with peoples, with learners, with families, and of course counting very much on your involvement in this. Next slide. I think we are reaching the very end. So my final slide is just a thank you, and actually going to what James was saying at the beginning. The future will be better, and we need all to work together to make it happen. And thank you very much for this, and I wish you a very good continuation of the conference. And of course, I'm very happy to take questions after the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. I really liked your insights into centers of vocational excellences. That was interesting. So, Chiara, we have a question from the audience. Are you ready? Yes. What is the direction of vocational education, and what has been learned during the COVID time?
Thank you. I will try not to repeat myself too much. I think that these 2 main lessons that we can take. First of all, during the COVID pandemic, that schools and VET learning has been disrupted much more. All learning has been disrupted, but vocational learning has been more disrupted than other types of learning because of the work-based learning component. So we found ourselves in general, not only in VET, largely unprepared for taking up technological instruments to supplement and support our learning. But I would like to say that after this initial shock that has laid bare the deficiencies in the skills of learners, of teachers, the deficiencies in infrastructure. Of course, I'm generalizing. It has been very different in different member states and even regions, but this has really been a wake-up call. So we can say that there has been somehow a positive effect, if you want to look at this, because this has now brought us much farther. We have really progress in leaps if we compare to the discussion that we had on digital learning in the past decades. I mean, in the space of a few months, our whole lives have been revolutionized, and we should not go back, in the sense that the new opportunities that, for example, I was mentioning of augmented or virtual reality are there to stay, and we should now make use of those to allow a larger number of VET learners to benefit from these opportunities of work-based learning.
Yes, thank you, Chiara. Education and lifelong learning is a major feature in most people's lives. It has a huge impact on our self-identity, social status, and standard of living. Our next speaker is Director of Policies and Lifelong Learning System Division at UNESCO headquarters. Please welcome Mr. Borhin Chakroun.
Thank you, Jan, and good morning to you, to James. I'm very pleased to meet again, to Chiara and to all colleagues who are joining the European Forum for Vocational Education and Training. It's really great honor and pleasure to be with you today. I'll be taking the lifelong learning dimension, and I hope my presentation will work. Let me see if this will. Okay, I think, oh no, let me try it again. Can you see it now?
Yes, but then when you speak again, it goes off, but let's see.
Oh, let's see if it works.
Yeah, hi, Borhin.
Excellent, hi, James. Okay, let me I would like to say that, of course, from the event, from the concept note of the event, from the discussion, and also from the different presentation, there is this focus on the climate change and digital transformation as a major focus of the sustainability. And it's good and it's worth to consider that in that way. But I would like to still think that the sustainability is not only about the climate change and digital transformation. At least when we look at it from a UN perspective, it covers much wider areas of focus. And I hope and I wish that while we are focusing on the green and the digital transformation, we also don't underestimate the importance of looking at the other areas. And it's important even in the European context. For example, gender equality remains a major challenge when you look at the gender pay gap across countries and within countries. So there is this attention that we have to give to other areas, including, for example, the digital divide across countries and again within countries. When you look at, for example, the proportion of households with internet within OECD countries, but particularly when you look at the European countries, you'll find differences within and across countries. So it's important that when we are looking at the sustainability, we look at it from a broader perspective than the twin themes of green and digital transformation from my point of view. But I think there was a question earlier, and Chiara kindly responded to, so what is the impact of COVID on TVET? And it's important that we don't underestimate, again, the importance and the impact that COVID had on education, training, on societies and economies, and on the skills development perspective as well. And even today, and if I broaden a bit the perspective to the global context, we do see that there is a better situation in terms of the return to school and reopening education and training institution globally, but we still have countries that have either full closure or partial closure of their education system. And we still have a million of young people who are not going to school or are continuing reading and accessing learning online. And with the challenges that we know in terms of vocational training, in terms of work-based learning, practice learning, and other capabilities that should be there, but they are not there in reality in many countries all over the world. So I think we shouldn't estimate the impact of COVID on TVET. There is another aspect that we are looking at, and we see that the learning losses are important and are real, but they are unequal. the students from the disadvantaged group are the ones that are affected most from the learning losses. And this will impact to technical and vocational education and training, will impact access to the labor market, revenues, and the lifelong learning perspective for many youth who are learning now or who are entering the labor market. We see also that there is an important impact on the well-being of youth, and the global studies shows that there is an anxiety among youth who are learning and entering the labor market. So those are two dimensions that we see from the studies we are conducting. In addition to what Chiara was mentioning, the learning losses and the well-being dimension are issues that we have to take into consideration in looking at the future of VET, in looking at the recovery, the resilience building, and reimagining vocational education and training. We also see that the resources that are allocated to education and training in the stimulus packages are thin. When we looked at how much resources are allocated to education, we see that globally it's less than 3% of resources that are allocated to education and training. And obviously, it's important. There is a moment today in investing in reimagining in the future of education and training. And it's important that a forum like yours make a call, advocate for resources to be allocated to technical and vocational education and training in these recovery packages that are now with hundreds of millions and not billion of dollars that or euros that are allocated to economic development. Let me come back to the twin themes that you have highlighted, and I think they are important. The climate change dimension and the digital transformation dimension, and how we see their impact on the future of technical and vocational education and training, or VET from a European terminology. Of course, there is a lot of focus on the greening of vocational training and the digital transformation. But when we look at some of the data that we have been collecting, they're not specific to vocational education and training institution, but still, we believe that they reflect a bit reality. We see that across curricula and across teacher training, the level of mainstreaming of environmental themes, for example, in teacher training, are not very important. And that in some countries, in around 36% of around 50 countries that we have surveyed, there is no focus on environmental themes in the teacher training. That issues related to, for example, environmental sustainability are not fully included in the curricula. So it's very important that we give attention to those dimensions in the discussion and in realities in the schools and in the learning processes. And we would like to highlight this because you are stakeholders who are acting on the ground, and that you see also the realities of what is happening in terms of teaching and learning, in terms of teacher training, in terms of the curricular change, including in the specific job-specific skills, but also in what we would call transversal skills. Earlier, James was mentioning that the environmental dimension, the green economy, the digital technology and digital transformation would require science, technology, we require mathematics and STEAM or STEM subject. But when we look at, for example, data coming from teams, we see that from grade 4 to grade 8, the appetite, the interest of students for science decreases. And their achievement in those subjects also decreases. So there is a lot of effort that we will have to do in attracting students to STEM, but also in making STEM more attractive for them. And this is a challenge that we see across countries and across different type of economies, different type of education system. The same is also for mathematics, where we see that from grade 4 to grade 8, the confidence, the student confidence in mathematics decreases again. And this means that the student that will come to probably vocational education and training will have less confidence in themselves and having the right skills to enter to vocational training, but also to succeed in vocational training, in particular in higher VET, as Chiara was mentioning. So I think it's very important that we take into account the realities and what we see from surveys like PISA, like TIMSS, and what we are learning from there and what requires in terms of action. But we also know from our projections that, according to the projection toward achievement of the SDG 4, we still know that even if the enrollment and the success in secondary school is high in Europe and in high income countries, but we will still, according to our projection, 9% of the students will not achieve, will not complete secondary education. And those people would need other form of skills development that can help them transition to labor market. Not to speak about middle income countries and of course low income countries and the average at the world level. So it's important that we give attention to what are the success factors and what will be needed to help those people who probably will not finish secondary schools. It's about equity. And again, the data we have shows that the great disparities in terms of success in education remains the wealth. If you're coming from disadvantaged socioeconomic background, you will not have the same chances as the ones that are coming from the wealthiest. And that's what, again, vocational education and training has to cater for. It has to be inclusive, it has to be equitable, and has to take into consideration that the economy, the society is creating and triggering inequalities, and that it's our role to make that an equalizer, a vector for equity and inclusion. Now, some of the points that James mentioned and Chiara are important. I would like still also to put some context matters, because I think it's important when we are thinking about the future of VET, we think about some of the factors that determine how VET will respond, how it will engage. And when we look at, for example, IMF projection regarding economic growth, we see that the Eurozone or Euro area will not be the one where there is the highest economic growth compared, for example, to emerging economies or even to the world average. So it's important to take into consideration that the economic growth will still be lagging behind, particularly comparing to the 2019 situation, and that this will have implication in terms of employment opportunities, in terms of access to labor market. And I think we have to take this in the consideration in the thinking about recovery and the future of that. That the unemployment rate will remain and is high, and of course it is different across countries, but still in some countries the unemployment rate is as high as around 15 to 17%, and this will impact the access to labor market, the relevance of the training that we are developing, that you are developing as well. Maybe a few final points that I think are important. And looking, for example, at a study that was conducted by McKinsey on some of the countries and how the labor market will be shifting. And there are two takeaways that are, I think, important. One is that the occupation transition will increase, and that the demand will be at higher wages jobs. So these are combined, have implication on vocational education and training. One is the lifelong learning dimension and how people can reskill, upskill fast and aligned with the labor market. Second is how much we will be able to take learners to higher ladders of the learning processes. The higher VET is one example, but other form of learning that will be required, including the workplace. This is something that probably will be with us in the next few years, and we will have to deal with it. We have also to acknowledge that the digital transformation is uneven across countries and across sectors. We see it from, for example, the data coming from the Federation of Robots, and we see that there are differences across sectors. The automotive sector is the one that is automatizing very fast, and where robots are quite a reality in the workplace. But it's not the case of food, for example, and other agro-food sectors. For example, the situation is also different from different countries, and we see differences between countries like Korea, Japan, and other countries like France and Spain. So it's very important to take into consideration that the pace and the level of the transformation will be different within and across countries. I would like to finish with the also importance that that is not only about waged job, it's also about creating jobs and about entrepreneurship. And when looking at the data from the ease of doing business, we see, of course, that European countries are at the highest level in terms of the ease of doing business. There are quite big differences between countries, and that there is a lot of efforts that have to be done in terms of easing the business, particularly for young people and their entrepreneurship skills and the capacity to create new jobs and new businesses. What does it mean for the Tibet agenda? And I would like to finish with the 2 slides. For us, we think that that in the future has to deal with the 3 main line of action. The first one is how to offer and equip individuals to thrive in lifelong learning, to thrive in work and life, to provide the skills that are needed from economies, the digital transformation, greening economies, and other form of transition in the economy that we think are important. But also that VET has to deal with the inclusive and resilient societies. It's very important that VET offers, for example, for the most disadvantaged youth skills opportunities, that it offers and equip youth with other skills that than the job specific. For example, citizenship skills that are important today, tolerance, intercultural skills that are needed to thrive in a more inclusive society. So we feel from a UNESCO perspective that VET has to cover and has to deal with these 3 dimensions: individual needs, economy's need, and society's needs. And that means that we need to take into account the lifelong learning journey for everybody. And that's for one key message is how are we able to connect the learning spaces from school, home, to work-based learning, to other form of learning settings. And we spoke about micro-credentials, but we need to speak about different form of making the learning transparent and accessible and recognized and valued. And that's about, I think Chiara mentioned that the culture of lifelong learning, how it is embedded in economies, societies, and in the different part of our education training system. We think that we have to take into account the key actors' needs: teachers, learners, managers, and training providers. But maybe the last important aspect that I think will be transformed through the future of VET is the what I call multi-layers factors. That's about how the quality assurance will change and how the technology will enable us to think about new quality assurance modalities, how the funding and partnership will be established, how we will comply and integrate different technologies, different learning environment, and the interoperability is one aspect that will be important in the discussion that we will have. Interoperability across different learning ecosystems, but also across countries, because the mobility of learning and learners is a reality for us today. So that's what I would like to share with you and wanted to share with you today. Thank you very much for your attention and great event today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for giving your valuable insights on lifelong learning. About our next speaker, did you know that former UK Secretary of State Michael Gove called this man the most important man in English education, even though he is German and lives in France? Please welcome Mr. Andreas Schleich.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join you. And actually, my remarks connect very well to what you just heard from Bahrain. I mean, what is very clear that during the pandemic, vocational qualifications became the backbone of our economies. And that's true in virtually all of our countries in Europe. At the very same time, for many young people, vocational education is still not the first choice. It's often a last resort. And we believe we can change that. But let me sort of start from the beginning. The first thing that we see is that actually employment of young people from vocational programs is very strong. That is true across the OECD, it's true across Europe. Now, when you basically compare that with employment from academic programs at the secondary level, in virtually every country, you are better off in the transition to work with a vocational qualification. In fact, you can compare secondary vocational programs almost everywhere with tertiary academic programs in terms of employment prospects. So that's the very strong side of this, that actually vocational education and training is a pretty secure and easy way into the world of work. At the very same time, we also see that that is not true when it comes to pay. Basically, in most countries, not all, but in most European countries, you can see actually academic programs still lead to higher earnings than vocational ones. So that's basically also a mirror image of the kind of attractiveness. Young people, obviously, see through this, and that may influence their choices next to provision. Now, but turning a little bit more to the future, I think remote learning moved from a kind of niche into the mainstream during the pandemic, and particularly vocational education and training was badly affected. Work-based opportunities became much harder to realize when social distancing required. But we have actually seen a lot of technology solutions emerging here. When you look at upper secondary vocational programs, you can see online platforms have come out in almost every country. And they have not always been at the highest quality. Often it's been about, conserving existing vocational practice rather than, using technology to change it. But it's something that actually has happened, mobile phones, television, a lot of technological solutions that sort of became into the mainstream to make vocational education and training viable, and you could argue even more attractive. We are also seeing that some of the approaches in some of the companies, particularly for the work-based component, have become really engaging for young people. Basically using augmented reality, virtual reality to complement experiences, giving young people possibilities to try out things that they could not try out in real things. I think there's a lot of very interesting developments. We're also sort of starting to better understand how different students learn differently with learning analytics. And that's, again, I would argue that vocational education and training has sometimes been the pioneer, actually being more innovative, more forward-looking than what we have seen in school-based academic learning during and after the pandemic. But what is also very clear is that teachers on the vocational front often feel less confident in using technology in their teaching. That's something I think most European systems will need to work on, and that's particularly true for older teachers. And if you look at the demographics of teachers in some countries, that you have the majority of teachers in the age group 50 to 59. So this is not a small minority, but you can see really the proportion of secondary teachers who are confident using digital technologies is actually not very high. And particularly when it comes to the in-class teaching, the use of those technologies for actually instructional delivery. Something to work on. At the same time, we have also seen that there has been added investment in technological capacities for professional learning, supported the development of new self-learning tools on remote hybrid teaching and related technical skills in the VET sector. You can see we're talking about more than 70% here. Establishment or expansion of teacher networks or community of practice with a focus on remote hybrid teaching and related ICT skills. So this is good. I think there's something that actually has been put into motion to make VET learning environments more, frontier-like, more technology intensive. And I think that's something that we should strongly value. Now, what is quite clear, and coming back to the attractiveness of vocational education, what makes vocational education effective is often the work-based component. I think Chiara made that point also very, very clear. And you can see that when you look at employment prospects basically in almost every country where we have data, the employment rate of 25 to 34-year-olds who had no work experience is lowest. And then it almost doesn't matter whether you talk about apprenticeships, mandatory traineeships, or even, other work outside the career. Now, it almost doesn't matter how it's embodied in the program. It's simply the experience of work that seems to be strongly correlated with increases in employment prospects in virtually every country for which we have data, particularly the countries that you see on the right side. Now, if you do not have work experience, your likelihood of being in employment is a lot lower. So it's the work-based component, but then when you look at actually how frequent is this, there's some countries in Europe on the right side here where this is sort of very strongly embedded. You can look at Denmark, the Netherlands, Hungary, Ireland, and Latvia, where sort of the vocational, the combination, the integration of school and work-based program is very prevalent. But you can see also many countries where this is more the exception than the rule. So you've seen the benefits of this, but the reality is still effective employer engagement is hard to achieve. And even though we know that the work-based component is the one that's driving success, it's often the one that is much harder to realize. Now, but once again, in the pandemic, things happened here. You could see basically that in many countries, there was an increase in incentives to get more work-based learning into the field. Obviously, that was also very difficult in many sectors during the pandemic, but you can see here we have 5 countries that had incentives before the pandemic and added new ones. We have another 5 that had incentives and scaled them up. And we had some 4 here that did not have incentives for work-based learning that actually introduced them. So you can see again, the pandemic has been a period where the efforts were redoubled to improve the work-based component. Let's hope it's going to translate into real outcomes, because again, we know that this is what's going to drive the attractiveness and the effectiveness of those programs. If we want to make vocational education more of a first choice, we need to do better on this. Let me conclude with a few remarks on the importance to reconcile the skill demand, what our societies need really with the career aspirations of young people. Obviously, if you want to make something attractive, you need to bring both of them together. What is very clear is that digitalization will be with us. Digital platform technology is driving the reorganization of our entire economies. You have small units of employers. You no longer know who is a big or a small employer. Few people can really change the world in the economy. We no longer know who is the consumer, who is the business. These lines are blurring as well. That's the world in which new companies are being created. And we see also that routine tasks are on the decline. And that's not just manual routine tasks. That is similarly true for cognitive routine tasks. So I think it's not primarily affecting the vocational sector. It's actually even more affecting the kind of academic sector. The kind of things that are easy to teach, easy to test are precisely the things that become easy to digitize. You can see a rise in technology intensity of tasks, and you put things together, and that's the future of work, now that you have already touched upon. It's actually quite easy to understand the mechanisms that are driving this. Now you can see which tasks are disappearing, which tasks are changing, and that needs to be reflected in the training of people. But I also want to look at the positive sides. Now often we associate, a technology with job losses and challenges to employment and things like this. But actually, our data show also something really, really interesting. And that is that actually technology intensity leads to better skill utilization. Technology intensive workplaces are much better at extracting value from the skills that people have. And that is not just true for technology skills, ICT skills. It's true for across the skill spectrum. The red segment is clearly visible, whatever you talk, whether it's STEM, self-management, management, numeracy, and so on. So technology-intensive workplaces are going to be the ones that are going to make better use of people's skills. And that's something that we probably need to embed a lot more into the vocational training sector. And there's another interesting picture, and it comes back to what Boren just mentioned. You know, the technology intensity workplaces are ones that actually enhance the new forms of learning. Digital workplaces are places of learning. You can see technologies associated with a greater likelihood to learn from co-workers, a greater likelihood to learn by doing, a much greater likelihood for you to keep up to date. So once again, we should not see technology here as a threat to vocational education, to training, but actually as a kind of amplifier of good practice, as something that will, you know, translate better skills into better jobs and better lives of people, if we prepare, you know, right for this. And you could see actually many teachers will need a lot of support, a lot of training to be more effective. Last but not least, you know, what can we do in the immediate term? It's really about, you know, providing greater flexibility and more resilience in our education and training systems. I already highlighted making better use of technology, not just to conserve existing educational practice, but to really transform it, focus more on future-proof sectors. We just had, you know, green jobs, things that are actually on, and then also Chiara mentioned this also, enhancing a broader range of cognitive, social, and emotional skills. In fact, you know, you could argue that vocational education is actually very, very good on the 21st century skills. Now, the 20th century skills was about the reproduction of subject matter content, academic education. The 21st century is very much about also social and emotional skills. Now, curiosity, you know, resilience, leadership, all of those things really play into this. And those skills are developed by having people work on real problems with real people that have real consequences. What can we do in the short term? First of all, you know, probably we need to do better in modularizing vocational education training. Often it's still quite lumpy, like academic education. And what we have seen during the pandemic, actually, that's often, you know, shorter kind of courses that may be on the weekend, that may be online, that may be provided in the company, that actually will lead people out of, you know, current difficulties into the next job. You know? It's also about, and Chiara mentioned this too, on the fast track licensing. Now, how can we actually recognize learning more in a more granular, more adaptive way, rather than, you know, just looking at degrees and qualifications? How can we actually ensure that we have, whether it's micro-credentialing or other tools, we have the kind of opportunities to do that. We've seen during the pandemic how important it is to rapidly reroute people. Now, when you have people in the airline industry, nothing to do, and at the same time, you know, you have people with similar skills in the medical industry badly needed. Now, we need to become more flexible, more open to actually make sure that the skills can be deployed where they are most needed with kind of additional training. So those things are really important. And last but not least, you know, forecasting economic demand doesn't just require data projection, but also really stakeholder engagement. It is very important to create a conversation about how do we anticipate the evolution of skill demand and can, you know, prepare for this. For the short term, once again, you know, it's really about more flexible, more rapid retraining. And for the long term, it is about focusing on sectors that have increasing skill demand, and we can anticipate. You know, once again, it's the kind of non-routine analytic skills, it's the non-routine practical skills, technology-intensive skills that will be on the rise. So I think these are issues that I wanted to highlight. There are a lot of tools that we have at our disposal. The crisis has been a good accelerator on many of those trends. I think it helped actually to move vocational education and training out of sort of specialized sector into the mainstream, make it a practical tool. But we are still only halfway on this road. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. I really enjoyed your presentation. Loads of interesting information there. So we have one question for you, Andreas. What is the role of qualifications and what is the role of micro-credentials in the future?
Yeah, you know, I think we need to make skills more like a currency. I think the problem with qualifications is that they will tell you something about your long gone past. You know, what you studied somewhere and how you were accredited for this. Often qualifications are not very good in recognizing what you currently know or what you can currently do. And that's where micro-credentialing, I think, will come in, or other tools that are more granular, that are more, you know, provided in real terms, and that allow people to create greater ownership over what they learn, how they learn, when they learn, and where they learn. And at the moment, we have micro-credentialing mainly positioned on the academic side. Actually, I would see the relevance and the power of them actually even greater on the vocational side. If we can become better to recognize smaller chunks of learning of individuals and, you know, build a currency so that people can demonstrate what they learn at the workplace, I think we will get a very powerful tool that will incentivize people to keep learning throughout their lives. So I believe, you know, the future will see a real shift from, you know, qualifications upfront to the credentialing of smaller chunks of learning throughout life.
Yes, thank you, Andreas. I have one question for Borhini as well. Are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you were talking about unfinished agendas, yes. What are the steps or actions to solve these unfinished agendas?
Let me say that there are three aspects that I was referring to. One is that the agenda of vocational education and training shouldn't be only on a specific aspect of the sustainability. It's very important that we be inclusive of the different sustainability dimension. The second aspect is about the learning pathways and then how that can be an attractive path. I think that the point about access to labor market, the ease of transition to labor market for vocational training students, but also the difficulties in the career path, in the earning and in the revenues, if you take it at the long term, remains a major challenge. And that in some cases, when we have conducted the review with the CEDEF upon 4 qualifications, we have seen that in many cases, vocational qualification allows access to higher education. But when you look at the data of the success in higher education, I can take an example. I don't want to name and shame, but when you take an example of countries where there is a full possibility for vocational training students to access to higher education, but then only 3% of the students with vocational training background succeed to finish a first level of higher education institution. There is a challenge in terms of the type of skills that they acquire and the possibilities for them to engage in lifelong learning. And the last piece, it relates to what Andreas was referring to today. I think we have to consider micro-credential as one aspect of the driver for lifelong learning. It's not the unique one, and it's not the only one. And it can be a trap, because if you don't know how the quality assurance is established, if we don't know what is in the micro-credential, we will have a problem in recognizing and valuing. And we know a lot about the takeoff of micro-credentials. We know much less about the value in the labor market. And there is a risk, and we have highlighted this in a report we published a few weeks ago, that there could be also that the funding goes into micro-credentials rather than in a full credentialing. But how we can imagine a decent job, how we can imagine about identities, professional identities, with just micro-credentialing. We have to be careful that it's important that micro-credential drives lifelong learning opportunities, but that there are other aspects that we have to take into account, that when you have a full qualification, you are probably having higher wages, but also that you are recognized more as a professional. And this is something about identities, about social inclusion that we have to take into account. So these are aspects of the unfinished agenda that I was referring to. Over.
Yes, thank you, Borhini. And then one question for Andreas. Can you add few insights on the dimension of social emotional learning from your recent report on that?
Yeah, I think this is such an important dimension. And this is where vocational education and training, I don't think have yet played out its strengths. Again, the future will be very much about the combination of cognitive, social, and emotional skills. And vocational education and training is a great forum actually to develop skills like curiosity, like adaptability, resilience, persistence, effort, that are very, very important drivers of social success. That's what came out of our most recent survey on this. Also, as a warning signal, some social emotional skills actually are less well developed at age 15 than they were at age 10. When it comes to creativity and curiosity, for example, in our schools, we see worse results at age 15 than at age 10. And again, that may be the result of students, being made compliant with certain ways of thinking, that we are not providing the room for them to do things, to create things, to imagine things. And once again, I think that's where vocational education and training have enormous potential on the social dimension as well. In a school, often students are passive consumers of learning. They are not doing things. They're not developing that agency that is so important. And once again, I think vocational education, well done, and again, mainly through the work-based experience, can provide a great opportunity for this. I do believe that we have to look at outcomes in a much broader way in the future. The cognitive dimension is just a part of the picture. I think the social emotional kind of success of people will drive, success at the workplace as much as just what you have learned.
Yes, thank you. And now, could you all open a camera? The EfVET office would like to take a family picture.
Please.
You are allowed to say something though, by being.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So if you would like more information about our speakers or their biographies, you can access our website and read some more. Now it is time for coffee break, and we'll be back pretty soon. In 5 minutes. See you. Has been there and done it. Oh yes. Please welcome Elsi Katainen, Petri Lempinen, Heikki Helve, and Juha Widgren. What happens next is something different, something that all our panelists agreed, and something that was made by our media students. That's an interesting fact. So, dear audience, just lean back and enjoy the show. And remember, any questions during the next hour, just type them into the chat box. We will have time for questions at the end of the show. So, Valentina, here we go. Can you start the video?
Hello there.
لکه خلک مسلې کې موږ ایون زمانه د طریقې کار بداو کنه چې لکه پنجاب کې هم زموږ ماشاءالله
headline today is Innovative and Sustainable Future panel discussion is surprisingly done in a different way. EfVET news team met all our speakers in advance and interviewed them in person. Shocking, maybe not. Interesting, most likely. Educational, absolutely. So our guests today, Elsi Katainen, Petri Lempinen, Heikki Helve, Juha Widgren, and now always brilliant Elsi Katainen.
So here we are. Nice to have you back. And I do apologize for the inconvenience about the quality of the video. The video is also in YouTube. You can check it if you want later on. And then, as I said in the end of the video, that our panelists are here to meet you. I am unfortunate to say that Elsie and Heikki are not unable to come here with us today, but I can see that Juha, Mr. Juha Widgren is there. So we could start with you, Juha. I mean, is Petri here also? Okay, if not, Juha, feelings about the video, what we did?
Very good. I think you have a really, really talented work in the future also as a host. But good to have and good to see that how you managed to do, and a lot of different people to talk with the same topics, and good to hear you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank God that you are here with us. Okay, so we are now open for questions and comments, of course. So if you have any questions to Juha at the moment, please just raise your hand and ask. I mean, I know that there is lots of going on your minds, but there are lots of comments. Yeah.
I have to say that your students made a good video. It was a nice day as to see that how they really build up the whole setup for making the videos. So that was a good experience for me too.
Yeah, thank you. So brilliant, very well done. Thank you very much. Okay, that's nice. Thank you.
Could I ask one question?
Yes, please.
I was curious to hear the last speaker. I think it was Juha who preferred tradition over innovation. And what I could see in him and in the machinery around him was innovation. So I'm curious to know why he has chosen tradition over innovation when everything around him was innovative.
Thank you. My background is, like I told, I'm a teacher, but I'm really into history. So it's a part of the company history that first we every time look after how we have developed as a company we are today, how we started, how we make the steps where we are today. So it's a kind of background information, what I like in traditions, which are creating the values what we have, and the values are giving us opportunity to use all the technology around even better and even stay stronger as a company.
Okay, thank you. I agree.
Thank you. Another question, Juha. What is the most important skill for a student who applies to your company?
We always said that everybody can learn while they come to work. So main thing is that they are having the values. And we talk about values a lot. If you don't have honesty in your life, it's very bad to start here, because it doesn't just turn like that. So we talk more about openness. We talk about responsibilities and all these things even before we start the work in the company.
Yes, thank you, Juha. So lots of comments, thank you for that. So I'm looking for the questions, perhaps if not, I will say that I think this concludes the conference pretty well. So thank you all for attending. We hope you have learned and enjoyed your time, and I honestly hope that we have discussed the right issues.
Jani, sorry, Katrina has a question. She just hand.
Good. Please ask.
Hello. Yes, I was so interested in Ponce's story and how you were explaining your company, and even the whole chain from the forestry now to the new packaging. So that's really interesting how your development chain goes from the forest all the way to designing new products. So could you explain a little bit about how that works? Like, how is your ecosystem then with the other companies who are, for example, making new products? Or because I assume Ponce is not developing packaging yourself. It's not your end product, but it seems like you are involved in this process anyway. So that's really interesting.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole ecosystem, we have a very good relations with our part producers and also the suppliers. And it's very good here in Finland to do cooperation with companies. And one of course, is that we have regulations and laws, and which are coming also during these years with the discussion of the climatic change and all the things we need to do together here. So to start the things, we need to have a common way to work and operate, and also the understanding why we are doing this. And this is really helping here with the companies inside of Finland. I have seen we are really situated far away from the southern Finland. So we have these challenges to be and operate far away from the Helsinki region is 550 kilometers. But still, it means that the companies we operate and we also learn each other. For example, Finnish car production company Valmet Automation, we are doing a lot of cooperation. Finnish company Kone, we are doing cooperation, and we are looking each other how we create this ecosystem better. Logistics, packaging, environmental issues. So these things are not easy if you are a small company and you have limited resources to do the work. So what is needed is also the partners who can help us already, and these are the companies help for each other. So alone we are nothing, but as together we can create this strengthness here in Finland.
Thank you, Juha. We have still 2 more questions, which is good. So there's a hand raised up by Mr. Tabanda, I suppose. Yes. You may ask your question. Please unmute yourself.
About it also touched on workplace. So, Chua is a company. Who do they value much? A student who has done simulated workplace learning and a student who has done practical workplace learning.
So did you get the question?
Could you repeat?
So we didn't hear your question.
Hello, I'm saying who does this company value more? A student who has done simulated work-based learning and a student who has done practical learning in a company.
It's a bit hard to hear you. I mean, do you have your microphone?
Perhaps he could write it.
Can you write your question? Would that be possible? So we can take the other question before you, so you can write it down. Thank you. So we have another question to Juha. What do you expect from the future students / workers, and what should they learn in VET education?
Well, as a locally, we have a lot of cooperation for the latest technologies. And for example, there was this interview by Heikki, and they had a simulator over there. So we are coming more and more way to operate close to the schools, close to the education. And like here in vocational school, we have an excellent relation. So the more we have students who come to training for us, they need to have more capacities that they already can during their studies to make the things that they are close to our technologies and a way to operate. For example, something about our welding. We used to have a lot of welding guys, but nowadays these same guys are doing much more. The work is not anymore physical. It's more like data-based computer work that they need to make the work. And also the same way we can see the painting line, the same time that these guys are now programming the computers and our tools. So this is changing a lot. And if we want to invest, and like we have been doing, investing for the factory to modernize everything, so we need to also the students to be close when we are ready with the new factories, new facilities, new tools what we are using. So the students need to have ability to learn all the time, and this is the same for our employees. We cannot say that when you come to work us, you are doing the same job, but you have to look after that. What can we improve? And also from our side, are we able to give them the tools so they can go to study, or are we going to organize with vocational school programs or studies more that we can reach the better level? So this is very important. Not only the young ones to come to work here, but also everybody when we are working inside. What is the goal for next step for educational way, as an individual way, and also the company way?
Thank you. Thank you, Juha. So we could try one more time the Tavanda's question. Did you send the question?
Sorry, I sent it to Joachim. So I think I made a mistake there.
Okay, so we could one more time try if you just ask the question. So please try one more time.
I was saying, how do they value a student who has done simulated work-based learning and a student who has done practical training at a company? And why would they choose?
It was a bit hard to get it. Did you get the question? So if somebody could help us.
Still some problem with the lines. I cannot hear very well.
I think the question was, how do you value work-based learning in the context of education and training? How much importance do you give to work-based learning in the sector that you were talking about, Juha?
Yeah, the work-based learning is like I said, we have the cooperation with our local vocational school, and we are doing in-house training and in-house education all the time. And that is what we value a lot, because it's the concretical way. It's also for the students the way to see already that what is this technology, what we need inside the factory, what is the work we need to do. The challenge nowadays is coming with the young generation. In Finland, we have noticed already that, okay, the education is interesting, but they are not very common even to know that what kind of work it is when you work today in factories, or if you work in different industries. We need to bring the students quite young already to see that what kind of work we do. And then I hope that they could be more dedicated also when they get inside directly to do the things. And I like in Finland that we have the tradition at school that we are really looking after to make the work by hand. that we are able to work with the tools first when you are 7 years and you start to do different things. Then we are turning to vocational school, so they have already skills. And believe or not, sometimes it's very challenging when we discuss about education with the local teachers, that when they are coming to vocational school, the level of reading and writing is going worse and worse all the time here in Finland. And we should be PISA #1 in the world. So we really have also the challenging with the young people that, hey, take your lessons, reading, calculating, writing is the first level we want to have when you are coming to education, to study in vocational level. And it's only a couple of years they're coming to work to us. So even I would like to talk very positive about our educational system here in Finland. There is a big challenges. So working and studying in the same time in-house is very good for us, because that is what we can help and support the young people.
Thank you. Mr. Tavanda, did you get your answer?
Very brilliant answer. I'm satisfied. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Juha, once again. So we hope you have learned and enjoyed your time, and I do hope that we have discussed the right issues. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure being with you all today. And before we end, there is a final words from EfVET President, Mr. James Kaleha.
Thank you, and thanks to all the speakers of this conference. I do agree with the final questions being asked by our moderator, whether you prefer face-to-face or online. There's no doubt that face-to-face makes all the difference in a conference, but I do appreciate the effort by our colleagues to put together this 30th EfVET annual virtual international conference. My general impression goes back many years when I was first introduced to the Finnish folk high schools. It was my first love with vocational education and training, and today's panel discussion reminded me a lot of that culture, which has seeped into many systems of education and which today one regards as being the future of education in general. Meaning that whenever there is a process of learning, work-based learning, hands-on learning, the experience that people learn from places of work or from simulated environments, or from being together in a place of work, makes all the difference. I think, as we very often say to each other, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And I very much repeat this with my colleagues here in Malta. And I very much also repeat and keep asking about the numbers. How are numbers changing? This morning, we were reminded that VET could be a first choice, but not a last resort. I think it was Andreas who has flagged this issue with us earlier today. But is it still a last resort is my question. And I think this is the biggest challenge that we as educators and training providers have. I was very pleased to hear in the last panel discussion the focus on teachers, that teachers should lead by example, that they should know the needs of society, that they should be in the forefront. I think the role of teachers is changing with technology. The notional class as we know it today, the traditional class as we know it today might not be the ideal class of the future. Young people are learning faster. Young people are learning in different ways. And I think these are the challenges that we have to face when the young people come to our colleges and to our education institutions. It is true, as some of the speakers said, that we have been disrupted by COVID, by the pandemic. That disruption, however, has been also said and interpreted by the panelists as being a wake-up call, and it is true. I think we are moving into an era where blended learning and where online learning must marry the face-to-face teaching that we have been accustomed to since the Middle Ages. I am one of those who strongly believe in face-to-face, and I could bear evidence to this when the students returned on the campus here in Malta. But we have to be and have an open mind, and the open-mindedness that we need to have in the way we organize vocational education and training ties with the council resolutions and recommendations that I was mentioning earlier today, because those are words. What the council tells us are words, but we need to put words into practice. So when we talk about agile and adapting to labor market, what does it mean? Well, we've heard the speakers, the last panel discussion that we had, although it was a bit long, but it was very informative. Well, the hands-on is always being in the forefront, because with the hands-on, you really capture everyone, because not everyone learns, and there is no one size that fits all in education. So my lessons learned from such an interesting conference is that in shaping the future, let training providers have a leading role. Teachers have a big role to play, and they need to lead by example. But in order to be flexible, in order to be progressive, in order to be innovative, in order to change education, I think we need to speak more to learners, and we need to hear more what learners have to say, and in particular, young people. I am always surprised and awed when I contact our learners here on campus, and when I talk to them in the lecture rooms. It's a completely different perspective. It is a perspective that very often matches with what the recommendations are telling us, with what the Osnabrück Declaration wants us to achieve. And therefore, this dialogue with learners is extremely important. It is extremely important because there are young minds who have a completely different culture to ours, and that those young minds will be shaping the future of education and training. And therefore, such conferences and such activities that EfVET has and promotes from time to time, I really encourage you to make the network of EfVET more lively, because as you have seen today, from the member of the European Parliament to the director of the Savio Consortium to Petri Lempinen, whom I know very well, I think it is all of these experiences that will shape the future of education and training. But in conclusion, I think it is time for us to start looking into numbers, into seeing how we are progressing, into how many we are attracting into vocational education and training. I will end with a final anecdote. Yesterday evening, I was invited to the launch of a program on climate change by our government here, and I met one of the receptionists there who came up to me, and she asked me whether, are you the principal of MCAST? And I said, yes, I am the principal of MCAST, and I also head the European organization EfVET. She said to me, can I tell you something? She said, my young daughter obtained very, very few qualifications from her compulsory education. She came to your college. She obtained a post-secondary level of education. She got her bachelor's degree, and then she moved into a master's degree. And this year, she's starting a doctoral degree in vocational education and training with your college. And she said this with almost tears in her eyes. This is the achievement of vocational education and training. We have no gatekeeping. Vocational education and training is open to all, accessible to everyone, and therefore it has to be attractive in the way the learners expect us to deliver. And I think such a conference really and truly, thanks to my colleagues in Brussels and in Greece and in everywhere else, they put together an interesting conference which we need to take forward and put words into action. So thank you very much to all the speakers, to the panelists, and of course, to our moderator who has put together, in the circumstances that we are facing today, an interesting video which I think we can listen to it again and again and derive interesting stories. Thank you very much for joining us on this 30th EfVET Annual Virtual International Conference.
Yanni, do you have the last word?
I thought those were the last words, but yes, I do. I almost forgot. Please answer the survey poll that Valentina just sent to you.